Okay, I'd like to call the January 24th, 2023 Planning Commission regular meeting to order. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Meeting may be viewed live via YouTube. To leave a public comment that will be made part of the meeting record, you may attend in person, or please call and leave a message at 360-279-4512, no later than 5 p.m. the day prior. Let's do roll call. I show Wassinger and Schacht absent. Southard, Plumley, Michoud, Chazar, and Bonson are present. I'd like to take this time to welcome Chloe Bonson to the Planning Commission, recently appointed to the commission, so welcome. Good deal. You have before you the minutes from November 29th, 2022, regular meeting. Do we have any corrections or amendments to the minutes? If not, can I get a motion for approval?
I motion to approve the minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We now move on to the public comment. We do have one guest in the audience that would wish to speak. Councilperson Stuckey.
Do this the usual way. Brian Stuckey, 967 Southwest Silverberry Street, also City Council. Just want to say real quick, thank you all for what you folks do. Welcome. I was on the Planning Commission for probably about 10 months as well, as we were discussing, and sometimes I didn't always know the impact of what I did here, what the impact was on council, because there isn't always a lot of communication. So I just want to let you guys know, from my perspective, I try to watch all the meetings, and I've also made it a habit recently when something comes up that went through the Planning Commission, and David Kuhl can attest to this, I've kind of been asking, did you folks have anything to say on it, besides just thumbs up? Because I think it's important that we hear those comments in some sort of detail to hear the different concerns. So keep it up. Please reach out if there's anything that we can do. I'd really like us to have some communication together, and I'll keep asking about your guys' comments, and maybe we can get a report now and again if there's a lot of discussion on a particular item sent to council as well, so we can hear everything you guys say. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilperson. We have nobody else in the audience, so we'll go ahead and move on from public comment. And I will open up the 2023 Comprehensive Planning Docket public hearing. Do I have a motion to open? Don't need a motion? Okay. Do we have any comments? Do we have any comments online? No? Okay. Public hearing is closed. Can we go ahead and we're going to have a presenter. CAC, are you going to be presenting?
Yes, thank you. CAC Kamak, Principal Planner, here to present the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Docket. I'm going to do a share screen so that I have a few slides to share with you on the docket that's coming forward. Give me a moment. So I hope you can all see that.
We can hear.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, the state allows the cities to amend their comprehensive plan once a year. So this is part of the GMA requirements and how comprehensive plans are structured. They have schedules on when comprehensive plans should be updated. So we have major updates once every 10 years now. Before it was once every 7 or 8 years. So our next major update is coming up in 2025. But they also provide for cities to amend the plan every year, but it should be done only once a year. So the idea is to not be making amendments willy-nilly, and it should be somewhat structured. So Oak Harbor has a code written in the municipal code on the structure of how the amendments should be done, and this is part of the process that we're following as part of the code. So I'll go through a few slides just explaining how the process works and how it flows in a given year. As I mentioned, this process is codified in our municipal code. Again, it's no more than once a year. And the way it's structured is notices go out in October and November of every year to the general public. It's published in the newspaper on the amendments. Usually sometimes we get applications, sponsored amendments, like if somebody wants to change their land use, they want to go from low density residential to a medium density residential or a high density district, they can ask for an amendment. So that's the opportunity for them to ask for those kind of changes in the comprehensive plan. And the deadline for these applications are prescribed by code, and it's December 1st of every year. And following that, the docket is formed for the following year's amendments. And that's kind of what we're going through. And so it prescribes about going through the Planning Commission in the month of January every year, and with the City Council approving the docket in March, and having discussions about some of the items on the docket from April through August. And then when you get to August and September, you want to determine what you want to actually amend as part of the comp plan that year. And there's some requirements for noticing and SEPA analysis. And we go through that and hold public hearings in November and try and adopt the amendments by the December. So that's a year-long process that we follow every year. So if you look at graphically at the calendar, I'm a very graphic person, so it's easy for me to understand it in that way. At the beginning of the year, January to March, reviewing the docket and going through the adoption process for the docket. In the center part of the year is where most of the discussions and the amendment happen. This happens in almost every planning commission meeting. We have an item for the comprehensive plan docket, and we're talking about topics there. We also go to the city council in workshops, and we have touch points there with them on the topics, so that by the time we get into September and October, hopefully the planning commission and the city council is familiar with most of the topics that we've discussed and go through the amendment. So try to make it as seamless as possible. So what is tracking in the 2023 docket? So this has been kind of some of the projects that have been taken on in the past. Dockets are fairly large, difficult to accomplish within a given period. So they have been kind of rolling from one year to the other in terms of their scope, because they're large enough that we take multiple years to work through them. So some of the items that are currently on the docket and have been in the implementation stages is the Housing Action Plan. And this is something that you have seen all the text amendments that have come forward are mainly recommendations from the Housing Action Plan. And we have more actions in there that are in the slate for being implemented. So that is tracking on the docket. The JPA and UJ boundary capacity, this is a very important topic for the City Council. And there have been ongoing discussions with the county in terms of to move this on their agenda as well, because it's a collaborative effort between the two jurisdictions to make any changes there. The transportation element is also open in the docket, and the active transportation plan, which is already underway, is part of that undertaking. And there'll be more updates on the active transportation plan. We've hired a consultant. There'll be some public input opportunities that will be coming up here very shortly in March, April. I'm hoping to provide some updates on that in one of your future meetings. There's also an alternate street connection plan that our engineering division is putting together. There have been some recent ideas that our engineering division have designed for street intersections to work better. We're trying to work with them to put it all in a plan format so that we can consider it as with the City Council and the Planning Commission in a kind of public process, and then you adopt it as part of the transportation element. The capital improvements plan, this is a plan that we update annually. And this is a very interesting process. It's almost a half-year process, and it's interesting every year as we go through the process, we notice so many changes because it's always a moving document. There's always opportunities that come up that was not envisioned when the plan was adopted. So you're always moving little pieces here and there to take advantage of the funding opportunity or grant opportunity that comes up. Land use element, that's another amendment that's a project from last year. This was, there was a policy change made last year to collapse the industrial land use, which was implemented by the planned business park and planned industrial park. Basically what it was, for anybody new on the commission, there was a land use category that had 3 zoning classifications implementing it. And this was a remnants from the 1980s, and it was a kind of a classification that wasn't very helpful. And so we looked at collapsing it into one zoning district or one land use district, and that was adopted as part of the last year's Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And so we have some follow-up action as part of this this land use change, and that is redesignating all the properties that are designated as planned business park and planned industrial park. We need to reclassify them as industrial. So no changes really on the property. However, we're just reclassifying them, and it actually provides more opportunities for all the properties by being classified that way. So, and then we have a couple additions. Or at least one addition was the alternate street connection plan, but the second addition is the downtown Marina scoping study. And this is an item that the City Council approved as part of their budget. And so there's a lot of interest from various segments of the community and from the City Council in trying to make some moves in the downtown and Marina and there's some important pieces falling together. As you may know, that the city purchased a couple pieces of property in downtown. So having a plan at this time or direction to move in with these key pieces may be helpful. And so I think that should be kind of discussed at a community level and have an understanding of which direction we want to go. And I think that study could be at least scoped out this year. There were no sponsored amendments, no applications for changes this year. So these are the items that are currently tracking on the 2023 docket. The timeline for moving the docket through, again, the public hearing here at the Planning Commission, and then it's going to the City Council workshop at their February meeting, and will likely take it to one of their March meetings, likely on the 7th, to have them take a look at it and adopt it as this year's docket. So we are looking at the Planning Commission to review this docket and make a recommendation to the City Council. And I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding that. And I'll stop sharing my screen. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you, CAC. Do we have any commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner Plumley?
Thank you, CAC. This may not be an issue with us doing remote meetings now, but what is the impact and mitigation plan should a deadline be missed? How does that affect the program?
Are we, you mean for the changes in a given year?
Yes, sir. So if, for example, there's not a quorum at a planning commission where the public hearing is supposed to happen, and it moves to the following month, which pushes the city council's date out, how does that impact what should be happening at the end of the year, getting things amended, getting approvals, and does the city have a mitigation plan to make sure that not kind of behind that eight ball should a series of unfortunate events happen?
That's a very good question. It's a process question. The process is in the city code. So it's not a state mandated process for us. So it's a city code. And when we do miss deadlines, it's understandable that as soon as we act on it at the next meeting, we should be well within acceptable guidelines, so to speak. So we've had instances where we have gone with the docket to the April first meeting in April, just because of either challenges in either the topics, or there were some questions that came up very late and that had to be pushed to the next meeting. So even though there are these dates that are prescribed in our code, I think there is some leeway as long as we're acting in good intent to try and get that done. In case any docket doesn't get approved for a given year, and we start going into the next year, we still have these items that we can work on because they flow from the previous year onwards. And so there are different ways that this could be done with things moving forward. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, thank you. My biggest concern there was the public hearings, and I know that when those get pushed back or they get changed, especially procedures not necessarily big on a lot of people's minds, that the public starts to get a little bit nervous thinking that something's happening when a lot of times it's just the nature of making this happen. So thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Ken.
welcome.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to recommend the city council?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the city council approve the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Document as presented.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any objection? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those against? Motion carries. Thank you. Now, item B, the amending of the zoning matrix to include open space. It's a public hearing. Opening up the public hearing. Do I have any comments? Any comments online? No. Okay, presenting is our senior planner, Ray Lindenberg. Ray, take it away.
Thank you very much, members of the Planning Commission. I know that we have some new members since the last time we went over this, so I'll give you a brief little overview of what it is that's happening here. In the past, before October of 2021, our zoning code had within each zone district a number of different lists that were permitted uses, either accessory or principal permitted uses, conditional uses, etc. That made it so that there were some inconsistencies between uses and definitions. We had situations where we had things like retail store, comma, shoe store, and or shoe store in a different section. So what we did is we went through and we put all of the uses into a matrix and kind of started combining and condensing some of those uses that were very similar to each other to make it easier to understand, easier to administer. And then from that, we put all of the zone districts into the vertical axis of the matrix and included P for permitted, C for conditional, and X for kind of special conditions that were put at the end of that matrix. And so that new section allowed it to compare the zone districts between each other much more easily. It makes it easier for staff to reference what's allowed in different zone districts. It makes it easier for the public to be able to kind of go and check and see what they can do in certain zones. So it was I think a win-win for everybody as far as ease of use, cutting down on inconsistencies and interpretations and things like that. However, at the time, for some reason, we accidentally left out the open space district on the matrix itself. So we are here to fix that tonight, or at least start that process. As you can see in my staff report, I included some attachments, and I will reference those here in a few minutes. But what we're doing here is three things. We're clarifying the functions of the items that were transferred when we did the matrix, and then adding text to include the conditions that are governing permitted or conditional uses in the OS district, so that we can make sure that we have all of loopholes tied up and make sure there's not any situations where we have interpretations or difficulties figuring out what the code actually is saying. And then number three, adding the OS column to the land use matrix with those permitted and conditional uses shown. Now, if you look at attachment number one, and I'll put that up on the screen here, and you don't need to read the whole thing off of the screen, but it is available to you, like I said, in your staff report. And I think there's an inconsistency there. It says attachment A on the text itself, but it says attachment one in your staff report. But this is how the original OS zone appeared before October of 2021. You can see that there's the purpose and intent statement, and then there are the principal permitted uses, the accessory permitted uses, and the conditional uses permitted. And as you can see, some of them are really long and detailed and kind of include standards within those that we don't really want to have shown in that matrix. So when we distilled down that information from the other zone districts, we did this for all of them. We made it easier to reference and easier to understand, but there are still situations where you have to have kind of conditions of approval and standards by which these things can be permitted. And so when you look at attachment B or attachment 2, we have the land use matrix revised. And so in the land use matrix, you see all of the permitted uses, accessory uses. And again, what we did is we took the accessory permitted uses from each zone district and distilled those down to include all of the different types of things you might see in all the zone districts: sheds, storage buildings, etc., non-commercial gardening or horticultural activities, parking areas operating in conjunction with a permitted use, those sorts of things that are understood to be permitted as part of the use that is permitted on the property based on that zone district. Conditional uses refer back to OHMC 1967, which gives you all the standards and processes that go with doing a conditional use permit. And then prohibited uses, these were, again, distilled from all of the zone districts and consistent, but just worded in different ways. And so we include those on there to have 3 bullet points, making it very simple and easy to understand that these are the things that you can't do anywhere. Uses in the shoreline jurisdiction reference also to go back to our shoreline master program to make sure that we are including a connection to that so that we are covering all bases with regards to what's required in the SMP. And then the actual matrix itself. And as you can see over here on the far right-hand side in the red is the new portion of the code that we're going to include tonight, or we're talking about tonight, is the OS district. And you'll find that there are some C's and some P's in there for conditional and permitted. And those are generally in line with what was allowed previous to October of 2021 that's shown in attachment A or attachment 1. There are some very minor changes, and we made some changes to bring things to be more consistent. And like I said previously, the matrix allows easy comparison between the zone districts. So when you see that we put a private park or a clubhouse in here as a conditional use, that's because we were able to go back through and see that it's a conditional use in most of these zone districts, except for a couple, which makes the consistency a lot easier to understand just from a visual standpoint. As CAC was mentioning, he likes to see graphs and visually, and I think that this also helps make it a lot easier to understand how the land use process works. And so as you scroll through there or look through it on your paper, you will see that we included the different uses in there for P and C, and then extended some across. We also made some minor corrections and additions on here as well. You can see that there's an additional P and C here to continue that section all the way across, and also in the PRE zone district, just to make sure we have everything consistent. We haven't had any issues with this, but we just want to make sure that there aren't any, that we don't have somebody come in and try and exploit a loophole, or have a situation where we have to make interpretations and things like that. So that is the reasoning behind having some of those additional changes in there that you might see there aren't in the OOS zone district. And then finally, in attachment 3, this is the revised OS zone district, the revisions based on the original from attachment 1. So you have that purpose and intent statement, then you have the density provisions and the conditions governing permitted or conditional uses added in there. And then we brought in some of that information that was in the original zone that got taken out because it was intended to go somewhere that it didn't. And so we are correcting those errors from previously and getting everything back in there so that, like I said before, we don't have any loopholes or interpretation issues in there. So we're going to try and kind of fast track this code amendment, but I wanted to slow down a little bit and get it before you, and also get it before our city councilors so that they can take a look at it, make sure everything looks good. What we're here for tonight is the reason that it's showing as a public hearing is because I wanted to fast track it. We're pumping the brakes a little bit on that. So if you can open the public hearing and then continue it to the next meeting, the date is shown in the staff report there. I believe it's February 28th. And by that point, we will have a chance to take a look at it with the city council in their workshop tomorrow, and get any kind of impressions or changes, concerns, etc. I would encourage the members of the Planning Commission to take a good look at this and let me know if you have any concerns or you see any kind of issues that might come up with it. Play devil's advocate and see if you can find a loophole and prove me wrong here. So I encourage that. I want to know if there's anything that you see that doesn't look quite right, and so we will go from there. And also, yes, the city council workshop will be in February, not tomorrow. We did move that back as well. Thank you, Sarah. And so that is the extent of my presentation. If there are any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Ray. Well, the public hearing is open and is continued until February 28th of 2023. Do any commissioners have any questions right now for Ray? Commissioner Plumley.
Thank you, Ray. I just had a couple questions for you. On the, under conditions governing permitted or conditional use where the amendment or where the updates are being made, subsection 3 says that outdoor events such as golf, shooting range, or similar is permitted if the land is left in its natural vegetated state. What do we mean by natural vegetated state?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again and go back to attachment 1. When you go to attachment 1, this is the code before October of 2021, when it was all intact the way it was for many years. And one of the things that was allowed in there under a principal permitted use was outdoor recreation lands such as golf courses, shooting range, shooting ranges left in a natural vegetative state, and I changed that to vegetated because I think that's more correct, if you will. The intent here, my understanding is when the code was written and applied to lands within the city, the open space zone district was kind of created to include existing golf courses and other kind of quasi-public open spaces. And so therefore, those were listed as permitted uses. And so if anybody wanted to create a new use along these lines in an open space zone district, they would need to meet that standard. Essentially, if somebody wanted to build a golf course on a piece of land, it would need to be left in its natural vegetated state. And so it's kind of a limiting type thing. If you take a look at it from the standpoint of what's there now, the golf course is a permitted use. Technically, it's probably legal non-conforming because it's not truly its natural vegetated state. However, it is a permitted use in the zone. If somebody wanted to come in and create a new one, they would need to meet that as a standard, and therefore that's why we included that in there.
Thank you. So using the land down at the end of Pioneer that was just bought, say that was open space, would the natural vegetative state, if someone wanted to turn that into a golf course, would that be native plants and what would have normally grown there? Or would that be concrete and weeds and they need to somehow build it according to that? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is what is defined as, if you look at that open space?
I think that that would be something that we would probably have to apply a lot of research and interpretation to. There would be many steps before you got there. That if you're just taking, I know this is hypothetical, but if you're taking that property in particular, you'd have to go through the rezoning process to get there. In order to rezone it, you have to go through the Comprehensive Plan Amendment, et cetera. So I think that at some point along there, there would be some sort of kind of negotiated action as far as what would be considered to be natural vegetated state. And in that particular situation, that's all fill. So there's not really a natural state for it other than tideland, because that's what it was before. So in answer to your question, I think if somebody were to propose something in a situation where we were going to move forward with an approval, or at least in that direction, we would probably look at, native vegetation plants being introduced into that location, because I don't believe that the intent or the interpretation would be to leave it as concrete and, grass or, weeds, et cetera.
Thank you. The other part I had was for section 4, and if we go back to it, it says that one of the permitted uses is non-commercial gardening or horticulture activities and structures. But the updated section 4 says, for existing agricultural use, no indoor growing operations are permitted. So wouldn't a greenhouse be considered indoor growing?
It would be. And the thing is about it is that those are kind of typically understood to be smaller structures, and maybe we need to be more specific about what we're considering indoor growing operations. My intent with that is to differentiate between somebody who has a greenhouse, a 10 by 10 greenhouse in their backyard, and somebody who's coming in with a 40,000 square foot marijuana operation or similar. So, maybe that's something we can take a look at as having a little bit of a stratification or a cutoff there so that we can make that distinction. That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Any other questions from commissioners right now? Okay, this is continued until February 28th, 2023. Item C on the agenda has been delayed till the next commission meeting, the SEPA thresholds. We move on to last item D, monthly department report. That would be Director Cool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Tonight, we'd like to take a look at the Development Services Annual Report. On the agenda, it shows monthly department report as well as annual report. So we put the annual report in the section that's normally where the monthly report is. The concept today is to talk a little bit about what we've done in the last year, then also talk about our work program for 2023. There's a section in there that will ask you for what you'd like to advance to the City Council. If after you hear tonight that there's not enough in there, please feel free to add additional information. And then at the end, I've also included a code enforcement report that we started doing last year because I thought it was important for you to see this is what happens in code enforcement, which is not normally something that comes to the Planning Commission. So I've treated this report as though it's an annual report to the Planning Commission and the City Council, as well as the Planning Commission annual report. So if you remember from last year, our intrepid clerk, Ms. Heller, she goes through and does a real nice job of summarizing all of the different meetings that we've held, and that's one whole section in there in your docket or your staff report. So I'd just like to take 1 minute to thank the people that work for us in our department. I think they should be front and center because they do such a great job. The first one is, and this is not all of our employees, but these are folks that have been promoted in the last year. Ginger Pennington came in and got her building certification as a building official. We gave her 18 months to get the certification, and she got it done in 12. So hats off to her for getting that done. Brian Colbert, who works for us, he's a plans examiner, building inspector. He's gotten his certified inspector rating as well as plumbing inspector rating. Kat Kamak, who you already know, has been promoted from a senior planner to a principal planner. Ray Lindenberg was an associate planner, and he's been promoted to senior planner. And Sarah Heller was promoted to senior administrative assistant. So special thanks to Blaine Oborn and Emma House from HR, as well as the City Council for supporting promotions for a lot of people in the city. A couple major things we've done this last year that are a big deal. This first one is the implementing the new permitting system, which went live on May 4th. You've heard me talk about that before, but it is a big deal for us because we were basically operating in the past as we were trying to process all of our building inspections and building permits as well as land use cases by paper. Everything was filed in a file. We were not electronic. The pandemic did do one thing for us. It forced us to use electronic submittals of plans through email at least. And so this has taken us to a centralized permitting system where it can be shared with the citizens, the council members, and you as planning commissioners. So it's a real big advancement for us, and I think you'll find it to be very useful. Has anyone had a chance to go online and look for our electronic permitting system? Perhaps not. Maybe next time we'll come back through and we'll show you how to find it and coach you a little bit so you can see what it can do. The other big deal we had, which is called a Kaizen process, and that's also known as lean. The term is also known as continuous improvement. We had the state auditor's office come through here. We spent the last couple of years working on this. The administrator, Mr. Oburn, started it, and then we've continued in our department. The key thing is we've taken all of our teamwork through the Public Works Department, the Finance Department, all the various sections of the city to try and bring everybody together and start working together better. And it's really helped improve our teamwork. So we're continuing to do this, and that's something that will always remain with us. A couple of other accomplishments we've done in 2022. These are ones that you remember. These are ones that you worked on. The Crosby Trace, 10 buildings, which was 37 units on Oak Harbor Road. Mulberry Place, 62 townhomes on Swantown. Cedar Hill Subdivision, 28 single-family lots on Crosby. The Glint Car Wash, that went to the hearing examiner this year and was approved on SR 20 in Barrington. Bayview Vistas, a 48-unit residential unit right down the street here on Barrington. And Marin Woods, 46 single-family lots. It's been around a long time, and we're getting to the point of being near final plat with that one. So we've seen a lot of current planning activity that's occurred here in town. Long-range planning, this is more of what the Planning Commission touches. The 2021 comp plan, CIP amendments were done, as well as the 22 comp plan amendments were done same year. If you remember the site-specific rezones, we processed that through an ordinance. Accessory dwelling units, that's the one where we took off the requirement for a homeowner to live on the site and got rid of the covenant requirement so that anybody can live in an accessory dwelling unit. Ray Lindenberg, who you just saw, processed the density standards that we have used to help make our city more dense and allow more affordable housing. The Crosby Villa rezone was done. That's a site-specific rezone. Kamak processed the height limit amendment, and that was for art structures downtown. You remember Dennis Lefevre, he processed the critical areas ordinance. and I came through with the existing building code amendment. So you've had a lot of effect here as planning commissioners, and council has approved all of these ordinances that you saw. A couple of building department accomplishments. McKinney Place, there's attached homes going in on 3rd Street. 19 of those homes are going in. The U-Haul storage facility, as you enter town, a lot of those buildings are underway and almost finished. Hillside Development, you've seen that one crank up a little bit. There's 11 model homes going in. You see a lot of grading happening now, and so that's underway. The Scenic Heights development has 4 homes underway. And I wanted to add this last item because it was a big deal for us as a staff. We participated and helped complete the Rotary Bridge. That was one where we worked with the Rotarians and other volunteers to help them get through the building and planning process. And we were quite proud of getting that done. Hats off to the Parks Department who really helped get that over the goal line in time. Other ongoing things we're working on, implementing the Housing Action Plan. If you look at your packet on page 32 of 44, you will see there's about 4 items listed under housing on that particular page. We've really implemented a lot of those changes already, and we hope to implement a whole lot more real soon. Active Transportation Plan, you saw CAC just talk about that. He's working on that as well. Blaine and I are both working on the Main Street Association, trying to support what they're doing downtown. Joint planning area with the urban growth area. We've been meeting with the county, and it's nice to know we have someone from county staff here tonight. We've been meeting with the county every several months to talk about comprehensive planning and working towards the 2025 update in the county. The way we can move the UGA line and the JPA line is if the county comes through, does their buildable lands analysis, and after all that analysis takes place, they find that Oak Harbor does not have the capacity to develop what it needs in the city, then the UGA line can be moved. And so that'll be done in 2025, and so that's a process we go through. Stormwater, the NPDS Phase 2 basin analysis, Dennis Lefevre is working on that. And that's a sub-basin analysis of all the different basins around the area to analyze stormwater. And so it's a little different approach that hasn't been done, and we're anticipating getting that done this year. And then Windjammer shoreline permitting, that's an ongoing process for us. As you know, the King Tides has done a lot of damage to our shoreline. And talking to Brian Smith, our new Parks Director, they're continually trying to work with various state agencies to get some of that area shored up on a short-term basis. So those are ongoing things that we are all working on as a city. New projects that you saw already, a little bit from CAC, and those are in the docket. The downtown Marina downtown revitalization has gotten started. Economic development staff is here. Steve McCaslin is here working for us now. And I've been talking to him about seeing if we could do a presentation here at Planning Commission. He's got an hour-and-a-half presentation he can do on economic development that he'd like to do for a lot of different boards and commissions around the city. And I think you'd find it really interesting because he showed it to me. So maybe we can schedule a special meeting and have you come in and check that out. Community Development Code updates, that's an ongoing process. And the 2025 comp plan update that CAC talked about, it starts now in 2023-24. It takes 2 years to get it ready and get it done. And then it's due to be approved by June of 25 by state law. Infrastructure planning, that's something we're working at as a whole leadership team. Blaine and I and all the different directors have been meeting to talk about ways to improve our infrastructure in town. And so we'll be coming out with some other interesting things for you to work on and a facilitated type process to start talking about how to do that. Windmill review, the Rotary is also trying to build a windmill here in town, and we'll start to see some of that happening. And then amend the county interlocal agreement. We have an old IGA agreement with the county that is quite outdated, and our attorney is concerned about it. So we're going to start working with the county and amending that interlocal agreement that's been in place for quite a long time. A couple other things I'd like to mention. The Planning Commission will be using the 32 goals that the county or the city established as your guideline of things to work on. And that's what I shared with you last time, the 32 goals. And also the bylaws review. We were hoping to get the bylaws done by the end of the year. And as you remember, the city council asked us to pull back a little bit on the bylaws until they could work through their direction for all the various boards and commissions to work on. They're actually meeting tomorrow to talk about ethics and other potential bylaw rules that we would use. And so you'll start to see that maybe in the next couple months. One other announcement I have for you. In the last meeting we had, the commission was concerned, or there was some concern about public outreach. And so we've talked to Sabrina Combs, our public information officer, and she's going to be here in March to brief you on what the city can do in terms of public information. And we think that'll probably help close the loop a little bit for everybody. And then also you saw CAC mention that February 22nd and March 7th, the docket will be at the city council. So I was talking to Blaine here, and he suggested maybe we could ask a couple of planning commissioners if they wanted to attend that meeting, either of those meetings, to try and bridge the communication a little bit. And so obviously we couldn't have 4, but if we could get a couple people who are interested to want to attend either the March meeting on the 7th, which would be in the evening, or the workshop, which is in the afternoon, depending upon your schedule, that would be great to have you participate. So that concludes our annual report. And Blaine is here. He said he has to add a couple of items too. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a mic here, so down there, so I'll just come up here and stand up. So a lot of great things going on, a lot of great staff, and I'm really proud of the efforts of the planning staff and development services and taking on a lot of initiatives there. And some people kind of say we're maybe taking on too much, but I certainly appreciate the efforts there and moving forward and really moving the city ahead in a positive way. A little background or a little follow-up information on some of the things you may want to be interested in. Under Kamac's presentation, he talked about the city purchasing a property, so I just wanted to give you a little bit more detail on that. We purchased 1081 and 1091 Pioneer Way, which is right on the corner of Pioneer and Bayshore. Happens to be 2 buildings on there that are one's an old gas station and one's old office building that obviously needs to go down, so we're evaluating that. The property has already been used for special events, and so certainly when there's city ordinance, the immediate benefit is that we'll keep it mowed and encourage it to be used for community events. Long-term, we're going to seek grant funding to deal with some environmental issues that has to be done. And we know from the environmental we had when we purchased the property that we'll have to do there's groundwater contamination, so we'll have to do some wells, probably about $100,000. So hopefully we're planning to apply for Brownsfield grant funding to help us there. And then the grant funding that we're looking for in Brownsfield also has an economic development component to it. First question people ask is, what are you going to do with the property? I'm just kind of tell you the short term, we're going to continue to use it for special events, and long term, we're going to do an economic analysis and look to how to develop that property. And CAC already dovetailed that into the comprehensive plan, which is good coordination there. And then also, good benefit here is November of 2022, last year, the citizens of Oak Harbor approved a referendum to build a new fire station. So we're looking at potential locations there. 4 were, I think 5 were identified in a 2016 study. So we're taking that study and kind of brushing it off and implementing it now that we have the funding through that referendum approved for the levy to go out and borrow money to build a new station there. So appreciate that. Spoken to with about our economic development director there. So or not director, economic development specialist. I don't want to promote him yet. So specialist, and so really taking initiative. I think that's bringing us up the next step. I think one of the things we did a few years ago was hit communications a lot harder, and so with our communications IT manager, we've really done that. And then also Park and Rec has been a major priority, and with the creation of a Park and Rec department with a very capable director, I think that's taking us into a initiative there. And so all these kind of overflow with planning and long-term planning and kind of have effect on what we do here in the city. And I think all these kind of initiatives will move us ahead in a positive manner.
Do any commissioners have any questions for
Either one?
Blaine or David? Go ahead.
So I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for city council, but what if, for the Pioneer purchase, what if that property is not usable? What if things are found that are not going to permit moving forward with it?
Well, one of the benefits, it is already being used as RV parking and for special events. So by the city owning it, it ensures that it continues to do that. So it was Phil from Spoil. The city built a levee around. Interesting, I got a lot of history there, and there was an old sawmill that in the area there. So I think we can find some use to it. Certainly, I can't say it's going to be a conference center because of some of the issues of dealing with that soft soil there and that kind of issue. So a lot of that study and a lot of the condition of the property will drive it. But I don't think private, we get involved in economic development because the market won't do it. And so that property was under contract 8 times. It kept on dropping out. And so we've got it as a kind of a last resort purchase. And so, and then we're looking at efforts and kind of synergy with the other properties around there and trying to develop that property. But certainly there is a lot of constraints, and I can't guarantee you we're going to pull off stuff, but I think whatever we're going to do is more positive than what it is right now.
Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, also to add on to what Mr. Holborn said, I've talked to building people, and they've said you can probably drive piles down to hard ground through that soft ground on those 2 lots that you mentioned. So long-term, there's a possibility that those lots can be developed.
Good deal. Great. David, do you need us to make a recommendation to pass on the 2022 accomplishment or to the city council?
Yes, if you could, that'd be great.
Do we need a vote or just consensus?
Just go ahead and vote. Yeah, just call a vote.
Great. Good deal. Do I have a motion to approve the 2022, let me get to the name of it. The motion to approve the Planning Commission Annual Report to the City Council of 2022. Do I have a motion for that? Just say yes.
I motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other conversations? All those in favor, say yea.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? No. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any of the commissioners have any comments?
No, just want to welcome Chloe aboard.
Good deal. I second that. Okay, with no other comments, the